So I'm here with Aleisha today, and but first off, before we begin the interview, can you please confirm with a verbal yes that you give your permission for this interview?
Yes, I give permission.
Great, thanks, Aleisha. Okay, so the first section of questions is the background about your life. So as you think about where you are today, how would you depict the journey that brought you to this place? So what are your central commitments? What does your career look like? And what do you consider the most significant lifetime achievement in the short lifetime that you've had so far? What would that be professionally?
Okay, well, I guess I'll start with what I'm doing currently. In my day job, I work in software, so I'm a technical lead at a software company. I've been in software development for about 8 years now. And then my main involvement in, I guess, the context of this interview is I am also the Wellington Branch co-president for the National Council of Women in New Zealand. I've been on the organising committee of the Wellington Branch for a few years now. I also am involved in a number of other organisations around Wellington, including the YWCA Wellington, the Wellington Alliance Against Sexual Violence, and I've been involved in the past with other groups such as the Victoria University of Wellington Women in Tech and a couple other clubs on campus while I was studying. There were probably a number of things that led me to where I am now. One of them being I was always really interested in technology, digital technologies from a young age, and I had a lot of really strong role models around me that let me know that women were lacking in that department, especially in software. And so it was quite interesting when I decided to study computer science at Victoria University of Wellington. I walked into a lecture theatre and was pretty shocked at the lack of gender diversity, especially having come from an all-girls school. I really wasn't expecting what my teachers were saying to be that true and that obvious and you know, in this century. So it was that shock, and then following that, the isolation that I felt in those studies, and that's kind of what led me to seek out groups that supported women. So together with a bunch of other engineering students, we started the Women in Tech, and after a year or so, we'd already pulled together about 200 members. And we had so many people telling us that that club is the reason they feel like they belong in their studies. I really quickly realized how much overlap our purpose had with other women's groups, women in business, women in law, the general kind of feminist groups at Vic. We were often collaborating and asking each other to attend events and support and share things. So I think when I was thinking of, well, when I was coming close to the end of my studies, I realized I wanted to keep doing things like that. So I was approached by the National Council of Women to join their exec, and I guess the rest is history. I've stayed and made some amazing friends, and together we've done some incredible work. And what I'm hoping is kind of modernizing and bringing different perspectives into the gender equity movement, at least in Wellington. So that's kind of my path. Oh yeah, I guess I should mention as well. So I find a lot of overlap because all of this work that I'm doing is voluntary. So the National Council of Women is an entirely volunteer-led organization. I find a lot of overlap in that work, and at least in those interest groups, even with my day job as a software developer, the tech industry is still very male dominated. And so perspectives like mine can either get a lot of interest, can get a lot of interest. Sometimes most of the time it's positive. There are still a few people out there who question the need for women in tech groups and women in tech panels and that kind of thing, where we hear from people we don't normally hear from in this industry. So I've been really lucky to be able to kind of hit all of my passions, whether it's software and tech and development, or working with people and for people in all of my kind of different roles. Yeah, I think, does that answer your question?
No, it certainly does. So, so a follow-up question would be, so in the company that you work for currently, what's the gender breakdown approximately?
Yeah, so I work at a company called Catalyst IT, and of the tech companies I've seen, I mean, we're a 25-year-old organization, so we've been around quite a long time, and I think there's over 200 of us just in New Zealand. In the office, I mean, it's one of those funny things where my team is really diverse. There's 6 of us, and half of us, or maybe 7 now, but half of us are women, half of us are Māori, and so we're all, when I look around at my team, it is very diverse. Most of we have a good split, I'd say. It's kind of hard to put numbers on it because we've got people ranging from development, design, legal, all of that. So I don't think I can accurately give numbers on our company. When I look around, it feels much better than it did in my computer science lectures, that's for sure.
And that's only like well, I mean, it's not the same company, I guess, but it's the change in, say, 5 or 6 or 7 years, give or take. Would that be correct, from when you did your computer science to now?
Yeah, I think that would be accurate. It's I mean, our company is one of those ones that has a real interest in improving diversity in the tech sector, but yeah, it's still very much a work in progress in the wider tech sector anyway. And I probably could say that even when I was first starting out in this job, it was less balanced than it is now.
Okay.
So they've done a really good job.
Yeah. Excellent. So what would be, do you think, your most significant lifetime achievement so far?
That's such a hard question. I just turned 25 actually earlier this week. So I've been doing a lot of things. So I've been doing a lot of that kind of reflection, resolution type stuff. And there's a few things that I think there's a really interesting question of what do you consider an achievement, and then what are you really proud of? I feel like they're 2 different questions.
Yeah,
I've achieved, I'm really proud of finishing my studies. I ended up with a Bachelor of Science and a Bachelor of Commerce. I remember, because when I actually started this job at Catalyst before I went to university. I was really lucky to have, I did a high school kind of program with them called the Academy, which is how I knew about them when I was 15, 16. And then I managed to get an internship before my final year of high school. So I remember thinking, when my studies were getting really hard and really challenging, and I wasn't enjoying it so much, that I could just stop because I had the job. But I'm really glad I stuck it out and finished both degrees, because that in itself was a huge achievement. My family was really proud, but also being a student is what gave me the opportunities to be part of those student clubs and participate in something like the Women in Tech and all of the other feminist groups I ended up being part of. which is, yeah, I wouldn't have had that opportunity had I not finished my studies.
Yes.
So that was pretty cool. Something else that I would say, I mean, this is something that someone might have said about me, but I remember being, when I was a little bit younger and I was doing a lot of public speaking about being a woman in tech, and I was going back to high schools and that kind of thing. I had girls coming up to me and saying, I've never seen someone talk about software that looks like you, that looks like me. And I had these like young brown girls telling me all about how much they love science and you know, what other jobs are there out there, and I made tech look cool. And like, this isn't the kind of thing you can put on a CV, right? But I remember in that moment, like, this is exactly why I put myself out there and do what I do, because we need more people who are different creating the products we use every day. And so if we can show these young people from really early on, before they're influenced by the media or society or anything else, about what they should be doing, then I think that's an achievement.
Yes, that's wonderful. It's sort of made me a little teary to hear that, because it's wonderful to be such a great role model for, as you say, younger brown women. Excellent. Oh, thanks. Okay, I'll pull myself together here. Okay, so thanks. Let's move on to the background about your work. So it's almost like you've already answered this question, but if there's anything else you think of, what drew you to the work that you've done? The question that I'm kind of more interested in this block of questions is, how has your work changed, and has your work changed from influences or experiences in your life, and has your life changed through experiences in your work? So kind of like a two-way sort of a process. So drew you to your work, changes in your work, two-way process, and then what kinds of sites, and that is sites of action or intervention, have you primarily focused on, and why? And you've covered a lot of this, but if you could sort of reiterate what's really important to you.
I think, yeah, so I did kind of talk about my journey into feminist action, I suppose, but specifically what drew me into the National Council of Women was actually the women who approached me. So they had maybe seen my work or been part of groups that I was also part of, and asked me specifically to come and join them. And I think what I liked about the National Council of Women is that they've been around a really long time, 126 years now, I think. And they were doing things like helping to organize campaigns and rallies and marches, which is the stuff that people can really see and engage with on even a daily basis here in Wellington. But I also liked that they were writing submissions and trying to affect change at a policy level. I think that especially now with social media and this kind of digital age of information, it's really easy to get caught up in emotion and people being really loud online. But it's that nitty-gritty kind of admin policy stuff that will have those long-lasting changes. Like the culture stuff that happens online is so important, but it's the people who go out and write submissions and help to actually affect the policy. That work is so invisible, but it's so important. And so that insight into that through the National Council of Women was really valuable for me. So that was what kind of drew me in and why I've stayed, because I just think the National Council of Women has this really unique relationship with government, and with other groups locally, given how old we are, and being founded by Kate Shepherd and that kind of thing. So a very cool group to be part of. In terms of how our work has changed, it's changed a lot actually in the last few years. COVID was one of those really good pushes into we should try and figure out how to do our work online. We in the Wellington branch were already moving toward that because our membership is generally younger than some of the other branches. So we have we'd moved all of our correspondence to email, and we'd had a Google Drive and, you know, all of these other kind of electronic tools for minutes and that kind of thing. Then we had also started doing meetings on Zoom, and now other branches are doing meetings on Zoom where our meetings are hybrid, in person and online, which means that people can join us from wherever, and it's just a little bit more accessible, a bit more inclusive, which is great. And in the last couple of years, we've also done a sustainability review, so making sure that not only the work we do, but also the way we operate is going to be sustainable and be relevant for how feminist action takes place today. There were a lot of changes to kind of our membership model and constitution and that kind of thing, so that groups or people will see us and recognize that we are standing for the same things as them, because it was easy to get muddled in that with all of the really old-fashioned language and processes and that kind of thing. I think a lot of the work that I personally am doing now is very layered, so it's not as simple as kind of gender equity anymore. It's are we considering the perspectives of people with disabilities? Like, how does this affect our Indigenous people? Have we made sure that we've pulled in all of these different perspectives? Because there is no point in feminism if it's not intersectional. Because even if we make these advances for women, there are still going to be groups of women who don't receive that benefit or don't receive equal or equitable benefit. So that's something that I've been working on quite a lot and trying to feed into the work that we do at the National Council of Women. And I think what you were saying about how has that impacted my own life, I think, yeah, in the last few years, I've been on kind of a journey to learn more about my own cultural background. So I'm Māori and Cambodian and Indian. And growing up, I always knew that I was Māori and Asian, but I didn't really know what that meant until the last few years, where I've met more people who are also on journeys to figure out their identity. And so as I've learned more about what it means to be Māori and where I come from and all of these other things, that's definitely fed into the projects I take on, and the conversations I have and the people I surround myself with, and the things that we all work on together. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks. So I wanted at the National Council of Women, two questions, I guess. So would you be comfortable sort of naming the people who initially approached you? Who did approach you initially?
Yeah, so I was first approached by Sonia Rantawa. She was at the time the Wellington Branch president. And we had met because she was studying a master's, I think, at Victoria University, and it was about chatbots, which is really cool. So we bonded over being women in tech.
Nice.
And she said, you know, I'm part of this organization and we need someone who can look after some of our admin stuff. So that's how I got my foot in the door. I think at the time I might have also known Vanessa Deru, who was our national president for the National Council of Women. She's since stepped down from that role, but she's still very much involved. But she's all over the place. She is one of the most active and busy people I know. I think she's a UNESCO commissioner or something. She was on one of those New Year's honors lists. Like she's incredible. And so those are just two of the women that I first met that were part of the organization. And yeah, we've got so many women in the organisation who have received New Year's honours or other honours, and hold roles in all of these incredible organisations. Even in our branch, we've got one of our members is Sue Kedgley, and she was a Green Party MP, and yeah, I think actually she mentioned that she was doing an interview with you as well. Yeah. So yeah, just very cool people. We've since managed to bring in more people who are kind of around my age, so we've lowered our general age, which is cool. It means that we've got, you know, people who have lots of energy and kind of a different way of seeing the world and different way of approaching problems, balanced with people who've been part of the organisation for 10, 20, 30 years and have all of this really valuable historical knowledge, all of these connections across Wellington, but also government and internationally, all working towards the same kind of end goal. I think it's a pretty powerful group.
Yeah, so you do have some heavy hitters there. So I wondered, and this is a sort of a difficult question, I guess, but as a follow-up question, you know, you're talking about the changes. Has that, within the organisation, has that been an easy change, or has that been, I mean, you know, there's sort of stereotypes on both ends of younger and older, or more established feminism and less inclusive or more inclusive. Have you had conversations around that with the group, or has that sort of, has it been an easy transition, I guess is what I'm trying to say?
No, honestly, it hasn't been. I think that's one of the things, which it can be both positive and negative, and having a group called the National Council of Women, is that women are so different and come from different places and have different experiences. So we have to be really careful that we can represent all women, which means catering to a lot of different needs. And the sustainability review in particular took about 2 years. So it was a really long, drawn out process. Arguably, it could have even been longer because just of the timing of when things were coming out and when consultation happened and that sort of thing. As we shifted onto technology platforms, there was a lot of resistance. There have been members who have been around a long time, and learning to use new devices, new platforms, especially those who live remotely and don't have a young membership to help them and to teach them things, it was really hard and scary, I think, for them. And I can totally understand that, because just in general, the older population is not given the support they need to stay connected. It's basically impossible now to not be online and live, you know, a fulfilling life. So I really did feel for them, especially with lockdown. I feel like there were a lot of older members, or older people in general, feeling quite isolated, and, you know, disconnected from everyone else. Yeah, so it was definitely a challenge. I think that our board did a really good job of trying to make sure we heard everyone out. Myself and some of the other young members were involved in kind of running Zoom tutorials and showing them how to use Google Drive and the kind of tools that we wanted to use. So it was just trying to set up time to make people feel like they were part of that shift. Yeah, because it had to happen. It's an inevitable thing. So just giving them access to people or resources to help ease the transition. But it was definitely a challenge, and there were definitely people who pushed back or felt like they weren't part of that decision.
Yeah, no, it's good that you know, from a layperson's point of view, even younger people keeping up with the changes in technology. The technology changes so fast, you know, and platforms and software change is incredible. So I like that you did that. And I also wanted to just comment on the ease with which it's easy to be loud about feminism or any activism, but the policy change is like always envisage, you know, that's the scut work, that's the difficult work, that's the less sexy kind of out there work that really does provide the foundation, I think. So, you know, yeah, I understand your comments about, yes, both approaches are important, but you can't have one without the other, perhaps.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so moving on to section 3, which is reflections on your work. So how do you understand the term feminism and what has it meant to your work?
I think of feminism as a movement for gender equity. I think it's important to use feminism because it's recognizing that there are genders who are, you know, starting from a lower place, that don't have the same access, opportunities, support, even laws applying to them, who will not receive the same health outcomes and educational outcomes, occupational outcomes, simply because of their gender. I think that's a really important distinction to make. It's something we come up against quite a lot, is like, of course, I believe in gender equality. We're there, you know, women can work and vote. And it's like, okay, cool. But only a couple of years ago, we were allowed to get access to abortions. And even now, there's still, you know, a lot of uncertainty around that. There's still all these stigmas that exist. And so that is why we need groups like ours working to correct, well, not correct, but, you know, improve attitudes towards women and other genders and change how society views our role. I think that's what feminism has become, at least. I also think that feminism, or at least my feminism, is, like I said before, intersectional. So I'm really aware of how the work we do and what laws and other things, how they affect women of different ethnicities and different abilities, different socioeconomic statuses. If that's not the current wave of feminism, I hope it's the next one. So that we so that we can be truly inclusive, because like I said before, thinking about women and men and how women are considered lesser than men isn't, even it's not as black and white as that. There's a lot more to it than that. What was the second part of your question? Sorry.
What has it meant for your work or to your work?
Right.
Yeah.
It has meant that, I mean, even from a really surface level view, pictures of our group now and the activities we do are very different to what they looked like 5-10 years ago. Our membership is really diverse, and we're organizing events like quiz nights, and we organized a fundraiser ball a few years ago and raised $2,000 for Women's Refuge. It was really cool. So I think it's changed the work that we do in that it's not all about policy and campaigning. We also we also really highly value social events and just having that opportunity for our members and our communities to come together and actually meet each other. There's a lot of different groups that exist in this space, even if they're more niche, like women in tech, or like more smaller, more targeted ethnic groups. In the end, we're all, you know, writing submissions for the same things. We're all showing up to the same rallies and saying the same chants. So it's so important that we know who each other are, know how to reach each other, and can support each other's work. So that social connection is really important. And I think our the way we prioritize that is in a really big way impacted by how we see feminism now, being intersectional and being this movement of bringing women and other genders up. Yeah. And there was one other thing I wanted to say. Oh yeah, and even the shift to technology and being able to conduct our work online. So we do a lot of organizing, event advertisement through Facebook and Twitter, Instagram. We stream as many of our events as we possibly can so that people can watch live from home, but also people can watch later if they've got other clashes at the time, because everyone is so beyond busy these days. And we try really hard to caption things. Like, the access to technology just means that we can be more accessible in the work that we do. If you can't go to a rally for whatever reason, there are other ways to get involved. There's other ways to donate to causes. I think recognizing that feminism must be intersectional is creating those channels for people to engage in your cause that isn't necessarily showing up on the day. I think that's like a really important distinction to make.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, so section 4, the relationship between feminist scholarship and activism. So do you perceive, and if you do, how do you perceive the relationship between scholarship and activism?
I mean, it's kind of like what we said before about we need those rallies and the marches and campaigning. We also need the submission writing. We also need the research and the scholars and the essays and the writing to back it up. Something that's really clear in both my work with the National Council of Women, but also in the tech industry, is people love data. They often won't believe anything until there is data, until there are quotes and stories to back up the argument you're pushing. So I think feminist scholarship has a really important place, in particular for that reason. I think it's important to have the people that can be loud, but also the people who can contribute numbers and anecdotes and also form conclusions from everything that we're kind of dealing with. There's an overabundance of information, and the way that scholars can sift through that and make inferences and summarize everything into writing, I think is really valuable and will help future waves of feminism and future activists when they can look back and understand what feminists and activists before them dealt with and went through and achieved.
Yeah, so it seems that you mentioned intersectionality a lot, and it seems that it's way more complicated both at a theoretical or academic scholarship point of view, and also then practical and being accessible for all people. So the added complexity with a lot of information makes it difficult for a lay person to then come in and actually get, like, we're all used to sound bites these days, get a sound bite that summarizes all of that. So yeah, good response there. So this is a silly question really, because I don't think you'd be here, and from what you've said, this is pretty much said and done. Do you identify as a feminist?
Yes.
Okay. So why? Can you give me a pithy response that you've not covered previously?
I identify as a feminist because I believe in gender equity, and I recognize that there are some genders who have it better than others.
Nice, that'll do. Yeah, that's a lovely response. Thank you. Anything more you want to comment about feminism or being a feminist yourself?
I think the only thing I haven't said explicitly is that all of this work can only be achieved by everyone working together. So, you know, I've talked about intersectionality in terms of like ethnicity and that kind of thing, but also it needs to be intergenerational. So the feminist movement's been around for a very long time. And I gave the example of abortion before. That was something that, you know, abortion healthcare is something that in New Zealand we've been working on for 70, 80 years. Women have lived and died through that time and not been able to receive healthcare in the form of an abortion legally. So we really need the wisdom and passion and support of older women who have hopefully not given up on the whole notion to back up the energy and the voices of young people. We have a concept in Te Ao Māori, which is tuakana teina, which is this concept of basically mentorship, a relationship between a mentor and a mentee. It typically describes someone older and younger, or more senior and more junior. But I think what I love about it is that it describes a relationship that flows both ways. So we, as young people, have so much to learn from older people, and vice versa. We can learn and teach constantly with this tuakana teina concept. And I think the same goes for activism and feminism.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing myself, and I'm recently returned to New Zealand, and I'm just catching up after years away, like decades. Just catching up with Māori, and I have read about, and I'm not going to try and say it because I would butcher the word, but that relationship mentor-mentee, and it's a wonderful way of describing it. Yeah, so thanks for bringing it up. Okay, so let's think about now locally and globally. So this is the intersection of your work with the women's movement in this country and any other international forms of activism and scholarship. So it's a difficult question, this one. Sort of puts you on the spot. What is your analysis, evaluation, and expectation of the development of feminism in New Zealand? I think you've covered your expectation, but maybe you want to speak a little more to your expectation. That might be a place to start.
Yeah, well, the National Council of Women does a gender attitude survey every 2 years, just to kind of get a baseline of how people in New Zealand view gender and gender roles. Our most recent one was 2021, and it was really interesting because the numbers were basically unchanged from 2019, which in our minds is not good, because it feels like we've reached this point of people know about the word feminism. All we can see is like, we have to highlight women and all of this kind of thing, and yet the way that we view women and other genders in society has largely not changed in that time. Felt like all of the work we've been doing is reaching a point of our networks and then it stops and it drops off. Yeah, so I think my expectations are, I would really love for people to go out and do their own learning, to not be afraid of the word feminism or feminist, and to figure out what it means to them, because my definition of feminism is going to be different to another feminist's or another person's. And my reasons for aligning with feminism will be different as well. And so I think it's really important that people go out and figure out for themselves where they sit and what they care about. And also figure out how things like feminist issues actually affect them, because again, it's different on a person-to-person basis. And it's not something that someone can tell you. Like, I can't go to a group of men and say, this is how I think these issues affect you. Like, there's plenty of studies and papers written about why men should be feminists and how feminist issues affect men. But if they don't conceptualize and contextualize that for themselves, they'll never be able to understand that. And that's, just something they then have to learn themselves. So yeah, I think that's my expectation, is just for people to go out and learn and not be afraid of the whole concept just because there's a label for it.
Right. Yeah. Okay. And so you've spoken a little bit about this, but could you speak a little bit more to what your relationship with other women's organisations in this country is, and perhaps what your relationship is with other activists as well?
Yeah. So I think originally the National Council of Women was actually an umbrella organisation. So rather than having individual members, women would be part of other organisations, and then those organisations would join and become members of the National Council of Women. And I think it was only in the last 20 years or so that they introduced individual members. And now in the Wellington branch, at least, most of our members are individual. We still have a few organisational ones, but most of them are individual people who are trying to be part of this movement when they've got the time. So we have long-standing relationships with other organisations locally and nationally, such as Zonta, the YWCA, Graduate Women Wellington, Business Professional Women, quite a few of kind of women's groups like that. So we're aware of each other's existence. We work together when we can. In Wellington last year, we organised a debate alongside Zonta and Graduate Women Wellington, where we got women candidates for mayor from Wellington and Porirua to sit on a panel and talk about issues, which was really interesting, and meant that they could talk about things they hadn't mentioned in their other mayoral debates, because those questions just weren't coming up. So it was really cool, and it was great to reach people we might not have reached because we decided to work with other groups. So that's just one example of it. And another time that we often work with other groups is through things like, so we're part of the Wellington Alliance Against Sexual Violence. We helped organise a rally in Courtney Place, which was, I remember it was like raining and the weather was really terrible, but we ended up having 500 or 600 people show up. And that was really, really special. And it was great for us to be part of that. And so through that, I was able to work with a bunch of other activists, most of them students. And we, just have access to all of these different activists through the groups that they might be part of. There are a few people who are kind of unattached, I suppose, and they're just known. And so we work with them when we can. But typically we will work with organizations, just so that there isn't one person doing the work all the time. If we go through an organization, then they can share it, and it's a little bit safer for them that way as well. Right.
Yeah. Excellent. And now we have in Wellington a female Māori mayor, which is fantastic. Yes. So do you think your work helped get her elected, or?
Maybe we contributed to a culture where people could be accepting of a woman Māori mayor. I think that would be a very cool thing to say, but I definitely we couldn't take credit for that completely. She ran an awesome campaign for a long time, much longer than the other candidates. So we're pretty proud of Tori. And actually Tori Whānau is one of our branch patrons, so Really stoked to have her support in our work.
Well done. Okay, so last section of questions, talking about international forms of activism. And so you might have touched on this and I might have missed it. What do you have, or what are the connections with other activists and scholars or organizations in other countries?
Yeah, so I personally don't have much relationship because my work is mostly local, but because I'm the type of person to get myself involved in things, I do often find myself working with our national president, Suzanne Manning, and that gives us access to more international spaces. So the National Council of Women in New Zealand is affiliated with the International Council of Women, so we do have connections there. Recently, a bunch of us did an event with the Japanese Women's Innovative Network, I think is what they're called, and we ran 2 nights of seminars for them and talked about what the gender movement looks like in New Zealand, and just answered some questions for them, and that was really cool. So we're definitely trying to improve our relationships with some of our international connections,
Nice.
but it's a little bit higher than me, but I can't help myself but get involved.
Yes, I've got that impression about you. You're a very busy person and doing lots, which is wonderful. So I'll ask this question, but it may, you refer to it as being higher than you, so this may not apply. So how do you make sense of the differences and similarities in the kinds of issues that are raised or the approaches taken by these other activists? So say by the Japanese activists or scholars or the organizations that you're working with. How do you make sense of any differences and similarities?
I think what is helpful for me is that I already have that acknowledgement of, again, it comes back to that intersectionality thing. I think I have that cultural awareness of there are some cultures that are just not as progressive as ours. And so it was really interesting talking to the people in Japan who, my presentation was specifically about kind of Indigenous perspectives on gender equality in New Zealand. So I was saying, it's a little bit different for Māori women, and there are parts of the feminist movement that aren't so pretty when you think about the Māori perspective of it. And they were saying that, like, already New Zealand is further ahead than Japan in terms of gender roles and gender attitudes. But they were relieved to hear that we're not perfect and that we still have work to do. It made them feel like they were supported on their journey, that, they're not going it alone. So I think that's quite refreshing, and it's helpful for us to know that the work we're doing can inspire and guide other people, but knowing that we're still on our journey further inspires them to keep at it, and they know that they have a big sister in it through us. And I think it is just recognizing that where other countries are and where other cultures are in terms of their kind of feminist journey, it's not as simple as like, that is how it is in Japan, or that's how it is in the United States. There are plenty of people on the ground doing heaps of really awesome work that, again, is invisible and harder to kind of see. But the things that we see all the time, and that the things that we see all the time are not a representation of right. Where things are at. Yeah. So it's just like not assigning blame, and not making conclusions that are actually harmful to their journey.
Right, or having assumptions going in. Yeah, understand.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Excellent. So, you know, those are my questions. Did you have anything else that perhaps we haven't touched on that you would like to talk about?
No, I think I'm good. I feel like I've been talking a long time.
You've been great. Thank you so much, Aleisha. You've been articulate and great. And I will turn everything off right now.